to those that have played so fantastically, people that have led the service, those that led us in prayer, the wonderful readers, people that welcomed us, those that set up this room to feel so Christmassy, people that made the drinks and worked the tech, those that will be washing up and clearing up afterwards. Thank you all for making this service what it is. So in that last reading, that was from this part of the Bible that we call the Old Testament. And that was written, as Emma said, long before Jesus was born. But it tells us important things about who this baby is going to be. And that verse, in a lot of translations, says, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And that's a lot of titles for one small baby. And if you had to pick a word to describe Christmas, I don't know that I would choose the word peace. A study published last week found that 52% of women and 39% of men say they find Christmas stressful. So if you do, it is not just you. And somehow the idea of peace at Christmas feels a bit like the classic "this is fine" meme. That in the middle of chaos, this is maybe what we think peace at Christmas might be like. That in the middle of that chaos, you're there thinking, well, this is fine. And if you work somewhere that sells things, I don't know whether you have found a lot of peace so far this Christmas. If you have children, now that the school holidays have begun, is the first thing on your mind peace? Or if it isn't, will you be woken up on Christmas morning at a very early hour with a whole lot of wonderful peace? Now, I don't come from a family that is very early rising. In fact, my dad, who loves all things Christmas, had to be stopped from waking me and my brother up on Christmas morning because we were just asleep when we were very little. But yeah, this might be your idea of peace. If you're a teacher, congratulations for making it out of the house at the end of a really long term. Have you had a lot of peace last week? If you're involved with church, this is one of the busiest times of year. There are so many services and end-of-year parties and choirs and music to sort out. It's not really a very peaceful time. And in fact, if we think about the first Christmas, that doesn't feel very peaceful either. This is a classic, copyright-free painting of the nativity scene, and it really looks quite cramped. There's the animals with their own sounds and smells, the angels bringing messages and interrupting things with their singing, the shepherds popping in, some wise men coming along later, and the artist has tried their best, but I just don't know that I look at this and think of it as a really peaceful scene. Now, I don't have any children, but even I know that babies are not usually thought of as the ultimate bringers of peace. Particularly not when they're brand new and haven't worked out anything about life. But peace doesn't mean quiet. Sometimes we describe the word peace in terms of things that it isn't. So we might think of peace as there being no wars. And it is that, but it's so much more, particularly in the Bible. And we just had it read to us, this idea, I don't know if you heard it, it said, Master of Wholeness. And that is much more what the peace of Christmas, the peace in the Bible, is talking about. A sense of completeness. Peace meant taking something that was broken or missing a part of it and bringing it to wholeness. Master of wholeness. That was what the whole idea of peace was in the Bible. And that included peace with God. That sense of completeness that humans can have in their spiritual life. That bit of them that knows there is more to life than just what we see around us. That can be peace with ourselves, learning to see ourselves as God does, and having that peace with who we are and our place in the world. And from peace with God and peace with ourselves, we can take that into peace with others, wholeness in and between communities and countries. Now, I'm an archaeologist, and so I really like to understand the history around the things that we read in the Bible. So at the time that Jesus was born, what was actually happening? What was life like at that point? What was peace like at that point? If you've ever looked at an actual physical Bible, the book version of it, you might see that it's separated into two sections. There's the bit that we usually call the Old Testament and a section that's usually called the New Testament. And in a physical Bible, in between those two, there's often a blank piece of paper. And that blank piece of paper represents about 400 years. The 400 years between those two testaments. And in that 400 years, God's people hadn't really heard from him in big dramatic ways. There weren't any prophets, there were no big name speakers that were happening at that point. It felt to them like 400 years of silence. And there might have been silence, but I don't think it was a very peaceful time. There were lots of things that were happening that made it the absolute opposite of peaceful. In the Jewish religion itself, there were deep divisions between what people believed. Some had been really faithful during that 400 years, and some hadn't, and there was lots of infighting. Different groups were fighting with each other. People were being looked down on for what they thought that other people didn't have all their religion sorted. So it wasn't a very peaceful time religiously. Some of the Jews were living in that land they'd been told they could live in, and some were spread across a really large part of the world. In some parts of Israel, there'd been almost a civil war. There were repeated invasions, and now the Romans were in charge, and the Romans were not popular. The Roman rulers would choose the religious leaders, but they would also choose the political leaders. And in these days, the Bible tells us it was Herod that was ruling. And Herod was mean and violent. He was a vicious tyrant. He taxed people to the extreme. And he did that so that he could give lavish gifts to other people, mostly to make him look better. He spent his whole reign, Herod did, concerned about all the people that might be trying to overthrow him. And he swept away family members or anyone else who got in his way. Fun fact about Herod, he had a wife called Doris. And the Romans taxed the people really harshly. They demanded money from them, and that was used all across the empire. So loads of people were struggling financially. Some people were very poor. Other people took on jobs like tax collector, knowing that they could skim off a decent profit. So it wasn't a peaceful time politically. If only we could find some sort of connection with people in the past, eh? These people were living in a time of corruption, of political conflict, in a deeply divided society, with taxes going up, with unrest, with wars and invasions all around them. And what they wanted, after 400 years of silence, what they wanted was someone to save them from the Romans. They were looking to someone to get rid of Herod, to get rid of all the infighting and factions within their religion, from the power struggles. They wanted to be taken out of the arguing and the heavy burdens that were put on them. They were looking for someone to save them, but they weren't expecting a Prince of Peace. They were looking for a saviour that would come as a king or a leader, someone who'd come in massive power, who would get rid of their enemies, who would kick out the Romans, who would fight them off and make Israel into the world leader they thought it should be. And what they get is a baby. They get the Prince of Peace. They get a surprising saviour. They get someone who comes to bring that true meaning of peace, that sense of wholeness. Someone who could fix their relationship with God, their relationship with themselves, their relationships with each other, with their community and their environment. And actually what they found was that all through history, God had been at work. He'd been there behind the scenes, working it all out, even when they couldn't see it at the time. It was the right time for this surprising saviour, the Prince of Peace, who came to get involved in the world. I don't know if you're expecting a peaceful Christmas. Maybe you've got a table full planned for Christmas Day, and that's exactly the way you'd like it. Maybe this year someone's missing from your Christmas, and actually you're dreading it. Perhaps you've lost someone through death or illness, separation or circumstances. And you can see that gap in your Christmas, and actually it really hurts. Maybe you're thinking about the money that you've spent this month and thinking that January is going to be pretty painful as well. Maybe you're thinking your Christmas is going to be really quiet, just you, even though you wish there would be more people or different people. And that loneliness feels especially heavy this time of year. Perhaps a dream that you had died this year. That job didn't work out, the business went bust, your health got worse, the relationship broke down. And inside you've got no peace at all because you're still grieving the death of that dream. That hurts a lot at Christmas. Maybe you feel like God has been silent for a really long time. And that can be true whether you've been coming to this church all year, or this is your once-a-year visit, or this is your first visit at all. Maybe you feel like you've got a gap in your inner life, where you're looking for something spiritual to heal it, but you just can't quite find it. Maybe you felt the silence of God this year, when all you wanted was for him to show up, to speak to you, to tell you really clearly what his plan was, just to whisper his presence. And God comes as this surprising Savior, as the Prince of Peace. He's the one who can bring wholeness back to your life. It doesn't mean everything will be fixed and perfect, but the Prince of Peace brings hope. If your table is full for Christmas and that's the way you like it, may the Prince of Peace bring wholeness and completeness to you in a way that you weren't expecting. If you've got a gap in your inner life where you're looking for something spiritual to heal you and you haven't quite found it, may the Prince of Peace be a surprising Savior and bring you healing and wholeness. If someone is missing from your Christmas and you're feeling the pain of that separation, may the Prince of Peace bring healing and wholeness to you. If you're looking at a Christmas that feels especially lonely, may the Prince of Peace bring you healing and wholeness. If your dream has died this year, may the Prince of Peace bring you healing and wholeness. If God has been silent for a really long time, may the Prince of Peace bring healing and wholeness. Whatever you're planning for Christmas, whatever you're imagining it might be like, may you know something more of our surprising Savior, the Prince of Peace, and the wholeness and healing that he can bring to you.